Once upon a time, in a village nestled in the heart of a dense forest, lived a sweet and innocent little girl named Little Red Riding Hood. She was known by this name because she always wore a red hooded cloak that her grandmother had made for her. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother lived alone in a cottage on the other side of the forest. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called her into the kitchen and said,
"My dear, your grandmother has been feeling quite unwell. She's not strong enough to fetch her own food. I want you to take this basket of fresh-baked bread, a jar of honey, and some fruits to her. Be careful and don't talk to strangers on the way."
Little Red Riding Hood promised her mother that she would be careful and set off through the forest with her basket in hand. As she made her way through the woods, the birds sang sweetly, and the sunbeams filtered through the tall trees. Little Red Riding Hood was enjoying her journey, and she didn't notice a sly wolf lurking nearby. The wolf had overheard her conversation with her mother and had hatched a cunning plan to reach the grandmother's house before her. The wolf hurried ahead, and when he reached the grandmother's cottage, he knocked on the door. He tried to mimic Little Red Riding Hood's sweet voice and said,
"Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought some goodies for you."
The unsuspecting grandmother, who was in bed, replied,
"Come in, my dear."
The wolf entered the cottage, and with a wicked grin, he gobbled up the poor old lady. Then he took her place in the bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. Not long after, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's cottage. She was surprised to see the door slightly ajar. She went in and noticed that her grandmother looked different today.
"Oh, Grandmother, what big ears you have!"
"All the better to hear you with, my dear,"
replied the wolf in a feeble imitation of the grandmother's voice. Little Red Riding Hood moved closer and said,
"But Grandmother, what big eyes you have!"
"All the better to see you with, my dear,"
the wolf replied. Still suspicious but unaware of the wolf's deceit, Little Red Riding Hood continued,
"And Grandmother, what big teeth you have!"
The wolf, unable to maintain his disguise any longer, grinned and said,
"All the better to eat you with."
With that, he leapt out of the bed and lunged at Little Red Riding Hood. But just at that moment, a passing huntsman heard the commotion. He burst into the cottage, and with his trusty axe, he quickly dispatched the wolf. The grandmother, though shaken, was unharmed. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother were overjoyed and thanked the huntsman for his heroic rescue. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood never strayed from the path or talked to strangers on her way to visit her grandmother. The village rejoiced, knowing that they were safe once more. And so, the tale of Little Red Riding Hood became a timeless story of caution and wisdom, a reminder to be vigilant and aware when venturing through the world, especially when dealing with cunning wolves in disguise. The moral. The story of Little Red Riding Hood teaches us an important lesson about being cautious when we encounter strangers. It's essential to be careful and not share personal information or trust someone you don't know. In the story, Little Red Riding Hood's innocence and trust nearly led to her harm, but she was saved by her own awareness and the help of a kind huntsman. The moral of the story is to stay safe by being aware of your surroundings and not talking to strangers unless you're with a trusted adult.